Okay, so for the second time again, thanks everyone for joining us today. Today we have Lisa Schainker. She's been with us before, but she works with Utah State University as an extension assistant professor. She's based here in Salt Lake County. She has a PhD in lifespan development psychology and a master's degree in public health. Her major interest areas center around enhancing social, physical, and emotional well-being in adults, parenting education, promoting positive youth development, and teaching employee professional development workshops. And we're so excited that she has joined us here today. Once again, so our topic for today is keeping kids safe in an online world. And she's going to cover some pretty tough and sensitive topics. So here's your trigger warning for that. But they're topics that definitely need covered and discussed as we're raising kids in a digital world today. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to throw them in the chat. Myself and Megan Matson will monitor the chat for you, Lisa, so that we can keep those questions flowing for you. And yeah, I'm going to turn the time over to Lisa. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Kirsten. All right. So we are going to be talking about, as she said, this idea of digital responsibility. And there are some sensitive things that we'll be getting into, as she mentioned, just because it's really important, I think, for parents to understand kind of what's going on out there. And it allows you to have more open and real conversations with your kids about some of the things that they might be experiencing. So without further ado, I will just jump in here. Okay, so where I want to start is asking you guys if you would ever do this. So would you ever say, like, your child is about to walk out the door of your house and you just say, bye, I don't know where you're going, who you're going to be with, what time you'll be home, what you're going to do, whether you'll be supervised or really anything else, but I'm okay with that. Have fun and I'll see you when you decide to come home. Would anybody do that in the real world? I hope your answer to that is no. Okay. So the reason why I say that is because a lot of times we would never do that in the real world. All right, very good. Okay, so now you can kind of see where I was going with my first question. So the question is like, would you ever just let your kids just be like, bye, see you, I don't know what's going on, but like, go do your thing, and when you come back, like, that's great. You wouldn't do it in the real world. And so my question is, or my seed that I want to plant is like, it's probably not something you want to do in the virtual world. Well, it's definitely not something you want to do in the virtual world. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why. So the question is, why should their virtual activities be any different than the real life ones? So, and I think it's good to like look at what kids are doing online. So this is for teens. So obviously if you have younger kids, they're going to be doing different types of things. But for this is percent of US teens who are 13 to 17 who say they do these things. YouTube is the most common, most frequent. So you can see that the net daily percent is 71% are on YouTube. We have 58% on TikTok, Snapchat 51%, Instagram 47%, and Facebook obviously has dropped quite a bit. Facebook used to be much more popular as those other ones have come into, have become more mainstream, especially TikTok. I remember when I first heard about TikToks, I was like, what is that? I don't get it. And then I still don't entirely get it. But now at least I'm like, okay, this is not going away. This is not going anywhere. So we just kind of have to deal with these things. And then one thing to note here is that dark blue on the left is what they're doing. It says almost constantly. So you can see there the YouTube is like 16% and 17% respectively for YouTube and TikTok of kids are on it almost constantly. That's their report. And then Snapchat 14%. And does everybody know about Snapchat and how it's different from other like just texting? Can somebody tell us how Snapchat is different?
If I remember correctly, Snapchat doesn't save any of your pictures. and it's mostly photographs. You can comment on things, I think, right? But for the most part, it's pictures that go away.
Well, it can be text, it can be messaging too. They use it for that too. But the main thing that you said is it goes away. So in about 24 hours, it's like it's not there anymore. But the trick is, so a lot of kids may think that like, oh, if I post a picture to Snapchat, then it's gone. And then, but we know that kids are pretty savvy and they can take screenshots, right? So all somebody has to do is take a screenshot of that picture, and now it can be used in whatever way that whoever has it wants to do with it. So sometimes kids may think like, oh, I can put any kind of content I want and it won't come back to haunt me, but actually it will. So I think the ghost is the Snapchat icon, or little mascot, and I think that's a good way to remember that like things can come back and haunt you. So okay, I want to move on to, this is some of the negative effects of social media. This is some of the research on this. I pulled from various research articles. So, and it's a ripple effect, really. So a lot of times because kids, and again, this is going to be kids who have access to, who are online, maybe have, keep their phones with them all the time, or maybe they're on a laptop, they're on video games, or they're interacting in other ways online. So they're up late, they're not sleeping. So that's causing them issues with sleep. When you don't sleep, you have issues with your focus and concentration. Obviously, this ripples into having academic achievement issues, not being able to focus in school. Increases in anxiety and depression, especially as you're engaging online, or if you're getting you're not getting the kind of responses that you're hoping for. Like maybe you're getting negative comments about your posts or pictures. And so now you're like starting to have anxiety and feeling bad about yourself because of the comments that people are making. It can actually lead to social isolation. Feeling bad about themselves, again, like if people are making comments, I'm sure we've all heard like in the media, even with celebrities, they get fat shamed or they get, other things. As soon as you put content out there, you're putting it in the public domain so that anybody can respond to it, and we can't control what they say. So there's a lot of hurtful things that can be said to kids. And of course, because they are so vulnerable at this age, with their body and changing and all that kind of stuff, they're already self-conscious. It can just really add to that. And then the other thing is, for older kids, there are people who are trying to sell them drugs, vapes, alcohol through these means. So like on Snapchat, they may be doing deals and trying to sell drugs. So there are people who are out there that they're using these social media sites as a means to sell to underage people. And then of course we have increases in bullying, assault, and delinquent behaviors. So the more they're on social media and spending time online, we have just increases in this. And again, this is mostly going to be with our older youth. And then this note down here at the bottom. So American teens who use social media over 3 hours a day had twice the risk of negative mental health outcomes, including depression and anxiety. So there is a threshold. So it's not like you're going to limit your kids and say like, you can't have any time on social media or online, right? But what we can do is try to put those limits in place, because there is research now that's showing that if you get over this particular threshold, that it's increasing their risk quite a bit. All right. Okay, so you might say, well, because of all those negative consequences.
What street?
Oh, can somebody work on muting that person, please?
Yeah, give me just a second.
Okay, so you might think to yourself, well, with all this negative stuff that they can be exposed to, maybe we should just keep them off social media completely. But unfortunately, it's just not that easy. And the biggest thing is they need to know how to function in the virtual world, because it's not going anywhere. It's not going away. So what I recommend is to let them learn, make mistakes, and understand the consequences while they still have you around. But it requires that open, honest communication with you and them feeling comfortable coming to you, asking questions, or telling you like what they're seeing and what's going on, so that you can help, you can talk about it and they feel comfortable to talk about it. So that's one of the biggest things that I recommend, is just trying to keep those communication lines open. And that involves not freaking out when they try to come to you and tell you something that they saw or something that happened, so that they feel comfortable continuing to come talk to you about things that they see. Okay, so we're going to move on, but I want to, I can't remember if we've talked about this in one of my previous presentations, but I'll tell you how this connects to our topic. But who can tell me, or how many of you can guess the right age when our brain is fully formed around that controls our impulse and decision making?
We have lots of 25s.
Oh, good. You guys are awesome. That is right. So our prefrontal cortex does not form all the way until 25 years old. And because of this, young people tend to be more motivated by instant gratification more than logic and consequences. So that is why this is one of the hardest things. They're not able to make all the good decisions about, like being on TikTok for, 6-7 hours a day without like somebody saying like, you need to stop doing that. Their brain isn't, they're not able to stop themselves. And some adults aren't able to too, let's be fair. So, it can be really addictive. And so that's another really important thing. And I think there's still ongoing studies now on how using the social media, and like, for example, like looking at these TikTok videos or YouTube videos where it's like their attention spans, it's affecting their ability to focus. It's affecting their brains and how their brains are developing. And so but there's still research that's being done on this. So we don't know all the ways that it could be affecting them. So I think it's just, it's just one of those things about moderation is key, right? If they're exposed to too much, then it's like, it becomes overwhelming to the brain, and the brain is not able to, like regular school is boring. And like one of the things that I think about often is like when kids don't like something that they're looking at, they can just fast forward it. They can just skip it, right? But in school, like if you're doing a subject or they're learning something and the teacher's talking, they can't do that. So you can't do what in the real world, like what you can do online. And so then it's just sort of like, this is so boring. So then real life just kind of becomes boring because it doesn't move as fast as what they see online, the content and everything. So that's just kind of something to think about. Okay, so as far as you guys are concerned, and this can be whatever your age of your child is right now, what are some of the risks or dangers that you think kids face when engaging in the virtual world?
We have bullying as an answer from Deborah.
Uh-huh.
Bad influence is knowing whether something is real or fake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exposed to things their brains aren't ready for. Those are all the ones we have right now.
Yeah, those were great. Yeah, absolutely.
Glorification of suicide.
Okay, yeah. And obviously that's a really sad one, right? There's those trends, right, that go on, and then people, they end up maybe doing things that could hurt themselves, trying to fit in. Oh yes, the idea of getting their worth from likes and subscribes. That's right. So there's a lot of validation that comes from, I guess it's been said that there's like hits of dopamine that happen as soon as, oh, I got another like, Oh, so, they liked this or they like that. They like this picture. They liked my post. But what happens when it's not likes? It's, like, oh, you look stupid, or that's dumb, or whatever. And they start getting those negative things. It's like it can have the exact opposite effect. Okay, so that's great. I think we covered a number of these things. So inappropriate content, they might see things that they're not ready for. We'll talk briefly about online privacy, the online enticement, sexting, sextortion, and you guys mentioned cyberbullying. But I'm going to talk about some of those other things. Okay, so another thing that's I'm going to highlight here is, because you might say, well, when are other kids getting their first phones? Well, this research was, I think it's a couple years old now, but the average age when children got their first phones was around 11.6 years old. So like 11 and a half. So that's like sixth grade. At least for me, it was around sixth or seventh grade, or maybe fifth grade for some kids. But there was actually no association between the age at which kids receive their first phones and their well-being. So what that told me was that it's a lot about maybe how ready the kids are to have their phone, and how responsible they are with it, and how much supervision and monitoring they're getting about what they're doing. Some of the things that we have to talk about. So if you have younger kids, it might be like, okay, like they call it netiquette, like how do I act when I'm online, when I'm interacting with other people, things that they shouldn't be looking at, or, like if you do certain searches, you're going to get things that you shouldn't be seeing. They might get pop-ups or things where they have to have passwords that they're not sure like how to manage. And then a big one is, man, trusting people you meet online, because just like you wouldn't want your kids trusting a random stranger that they meet in person, they're going to get approached online. If they're even on video games, they can have other users that are online on a video game that start chatting with them, and they think it's a child, they think it's somebody their own age, but that person could be anyone, right? We have no idea who that is. So teaching younger kids that, we don't know who's on the other end of that. Just like we don't talk to strangers in person, we don't talk to strangers online, or even, depending on what activities they do. With our tweens and teens, we need to start talking about cyberbullying and what that looks like, how to not participate in it, because they may not be like starting it, but if they help spread things, then they're actually contributing to it. And so understanding what that is and what that looks like. Sexting, which we'll talk more about that. Posting personal or inappropriate information. Again, we'll talk more about that. And then meeting up with people that they meet online, but setting up meetings like, inviting somebody that they met online to come over, or, hey, let's meet up at the park kind of stuff. So making sure they understand that. It's really important to start those conversations early. We want to develop trust between you and your child. I kind of mentioned this earlier. All of that is going to help them stay safe, both offline and online. Also, you have an opportunity through this and to have these conversations around critical thinking and problem-solving skills. So, helping your kids understand, like, oh yeah, do you really know who that is? How can you know that they're not they're your age? How do you really know that that person is who they say they are? So helping them to work through that on their own develops their critical thinking. So asking them questions, helping them think through it instead of just telling them what to do or what not to do, helping them kind of come to those conclusions on their own by thinking it through. Okay, so some of the things that you could potentially like raise to your child is things like this. Has anyone ever sent you a comment, post, picture, video, or chat that made you feel uncomfortable? Did you comment on that post? And then asking them what made you feel uncomfortable about it. These are just ways that you can have conversations without saying, like, are you doing this? You're making them feel uncomfortable. Other ways you can bring up these topics are like, hey, some of my coworkers were talking about, or they heard or I heard something on the news that this is happening. Has this ever happened to you? So you're able to kind of bring it up in a non-threatening way, not because you think they're doing it or they're engaging in something they shouldn't be, but just because it's like, hey, I've heard about this. I've heard this is happening. Is this going on? Have you had this happen? It makes it a lot less threatening. Okay, so moving into inappropriate content. So it could be any of these things. And so we want to listen without judgment or shame. I'll tell you a story. I have a friend whose son, he was, I don't know, probably like 14 or 15 at the time. He came to her and he told her that he had been viewing pornography online. And that was a big deal that he was able to share that with her. And of course, she could have freaked out and made him, and shamed him and said, like, how could you do that? That's, better than that, right? And that would be shaming him. But that's not really helping him, because what had happened, he had actually recognized that he had almost developed an addiction. And he needed help to like get through that. And so she was able to find him somebody to go see and work, like professional, and work through that issue. So it's like, when our kids come to us, we don't want them to feel like we think they're bad or that they've done something really wrong, because it's really the time when we need to help guide them through some of these things. And so I love the bottom right one, be kind to yourself. You can have strong emotions about something that they tell you or something that's happened, but try to remain calm so that they know that they can come to you about things in the future. So I think that's really important to remember. Okay, and then if there is something that needs to be reported, then you want to help them through that too, like what that process looks like. And there are online places where you can report bullying. If in your school system, if they're experiencing bullying with another student, there are something's going on with another student at the school. There are ways that you can do that or get in touch with the counselor or principal, somebody at the school. They unfortunately are getting a lot of reports of cyberbullying. We talk to a lot of the schools and a lot of the principals, and they tell us they're dealing with this kind of stuff all the time. So this is actually one of the most popular presentations that we do around the county in the school system, is to help parents kind of understand that's just because the schools have such an issue with it. But look at their privacy settings so that they can't see certain things, or and block things whenever possible, or have them block things, and then reporting when it makes sense. Some of the things that they might see online are offensive language, illegal or inappropriate behaviors, which they may not understand are illegal. They might see kids using drugs or drinking. They might see things like hate speech. They might see violence. Other kids, doing things that are hurting themselves. I know I've seen tons of those videos of like stupid stunts where kids are, doing ridiculous things and getting hurt. But the problem is that they get so much reinforcement for doing that because so many people are viewing their content. So I think, something to think about is like, it's what they're viewing, but also what message does that send about like what is popular and like what will get them more views of their own content they put out there. It's like, oh, well, that person got 1 million views for that video. So, if I'm going to do something similar. So we don't want them to engage in things that could get themselves hurt because they think that's the way to get more attention. Something that you want to make sure that you talk about with your kids is what's okay and what's not okay in terms of like sharing personal information. Being really careful if they're posting things like if you're on vacation and you're not at your house, or where they are all the time. Sometimes pictures have geolocation information on them that can be stripped out of the pictures. So you want to be careful with what information is being shared out there, because somebody could start stalking your child. We don't know. It also, we've all heard this, like we don't want people to know when we're out of town, for example, because then they know no one's home. And then our home becomes a potential target for being robbed or some other thing happening there. So being really careful about location, I think that's really important. And then, of course, the sending, viewing, or sharing explicit or provocative pictures is a huge thing. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But personal information could include things like passwords, your home address, where they are all the time. I know there's some apps where kids are like every like hour or something throughout the day, they're like posting a thing about like what a picture and what they're doing. Well, if that picture has their geolocation, then somebody could literally be like tracking where they are at all times. So that's not something that we want. So we want to really be careful about that. And even email addresses, because then sharing that out on the internet can create issues for them. And obviously, yeah, the phone numbers too. So when they share that information, it can lead to all these things, identity theft, the stalking we talked about, potentially getting hacked, sextortion, which we'll talk about in a minute, online scams. And because your kids, their brain isn't developed all the way, it's really hard for them to tell the difference between, is this a scam or is this a real person? There's people that are like, this is the police. I need to have this XYZ information. And so it's like, well, how do you really know it's the police? Helping them like work through that and understand like that people pretend like they're the police, or people pretend that they're somebody that is asking for this information. So just really knowing how to be cognizant and aware. So check the privacy settings on the apps that they're using. So make sure that you know what apps they are using on social media or what they're doing online. So you can create those, you can look into those privacy settings. You can see what's going on there. Help them understand how to create strong passwords. Talk to them about friends lists and like how to, okay, if you want to be on this app, you're going to have to only share content with your friends and not just the public. Okay, so being really careful about that too. And then making sure they know who each of their friends is that they're sharing their content with, so it's not strangers, right? That they think are their a friend, and not just letting anybody join their friend group or friend them on an app. And then creating a safety plan so that they know what to do if something does happen. They will come talk to you. Okay, so looking at bullying and bullying plus technology is what we have with cyberbullying. And one of the reasons why cyberbullying is such an issue is that it doesn't go away, like it doesn't stop. So in-person bullying, like it happens, for example, when they're in school. It's the old-fashioned way, bullying, which is that, somebody's like somebody's stealing their lunch money, or somebody's, just giving them a hard time. But cyberbullying doesn't stop. It's like 24/7. They can't get away from it. And so it could be any of these things. It could be mean texts. It could be like making, ridiculous pictures of them, spreading rumors or gossip about them, sending threatening or harassing comments. So, so cyberbullying is a serious issue. It spikes in junior high. So it's highest in junior high, and then it goes down just slightly in high school. But the data is telling us that about a third of junior high kids have experienced cyberbullying. It's more common with girls than boys, too. But about a third of kids. And so it's, highly likely that at some point your child or one of their good friends will experience that. So it follows them home, it spreads faster, and there's a wider audience because it can be just shared out so quickly. And it's very difficult. Obviously, once something is out there, it's very hard to like pull it back in. It's almost impossible in a lot of ways, especially because of screenshots nowadays. So people, even if it's on something, it's like, oh, take that, you get a picture taken down off a website. But if somebody had made a screenshot of it, it's like you can't get that back. It's now in their possession. Okay, so moving on to sexting. Sexting is basically sending or posting nude or partially nude images. Research suggests that about 1 out of 5 teens have sexted, and it's over a third of teens have said they've received a sex message from someone else. So again, this is something that is happening out there, and you might ask the question, well, why? Why would kids engage in this? Well, one of the reasons is because kids are wanting to be accepted and liked. If they have a crush on somebody and that person says, hey, if you like me, you'd send me a picture of you with, without a shirt on, or you take a picture wearing this or that, even if it's in a bathing suit or whatever. And so they're getting that pressure. And unfortunately, again, I'm going to go back to brain development because of their brain isn't all the way developed. They're not necessarily thinking through all the consequences of that. They're just thinking about that instant gratification of, oh, I want this person to like me. I want my crush to like me, so I'm going to do what they ask. And so then they're setting themselves up to have this, to have these pictures then available to people out there. So that's kind of what it would happen. So some of the other reasons, to be funny, sometimes it's just they just don't take it very seriously. To impress a crush, peer pressure, threats, experimenting with relationship, sexual behavior, and boundaries. So that's a thing, as they get older, they're like, just exploring stuff. So it's just something that they might do because of that. There's this little video that if there's a video, I won't show it to you now, but basically it shows like how fast a picture can spread and basically get in the wrong hands of somebody who could then be actually like using it in really unfortunate ways. So it's like it starts with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or somebody that they're dating, but then they share it out, and then the next thing you know, it gets out like in the public domain. And so that's kind of what that video shows. Some of the consequences, humiliation, obviously it feels horrible, right, when this happens to you and people that you did not intend to see something or seeing it. Bullying, you can be bullied, blackmail, we'll get into that. That's basically what sextortion is. Issues with the school, so getting in trouble at the school. If it's bad enough, it could get up to police involvement. So one of the things you want to make sure that you're telling your kids is, like even if you didn't start this message, if you send it out to other people, you're participating in this act. And that's not something we want them to do. So just helping them understand, like if you do ever receive an image or a message that's inappropriate, just delete it. That it's not something that you want to share with anybody. So making sure they understand that. Giving them real life examples so that they understand, things that have actually happened to other kids could be helpful. Talking about how the images can spread. There are different videos that you can share with them just that show that how fast it can spread. So just helping them to understand the consequences and letting that sink in, and they might have to see that or hear that multiple times to actually get it. And then there's a cybertipline.org. That's a place where it can be reported. Okay, so then online enticement, we'll move on to this. Basically, this is sort of, sometimes people refer to this as like your kids are being groomed, is another way to think about this. So let's say that they, okay, so I like to explain this as like, if you guys remember the Dateline To Catch a Predator episodes, I don't know that they still have those, but they were very popular, I think, like in the, I don't know if it was late 90s or 2000s. But those To Catch a Predator, basically you had somebody who a lot of times was pretending to be a younger person, or sometimes they are who they say they are, but they're basically just like trying to entice the child to, feel like they're that they're going to give them presents and that they're going to take them to cool places and they're going to do these things for them. And so that's how they entice them. But basically, this is leading up to something potentially really bad, like sextortion. So sextortion is basically, well, first of all, how many of you guys have heard of sextortion? Okay, so it's
and a few no's, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so we're kind of mixed. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's talk about it. So sextortion. Okay. So basically it's basically blackmail, but so kids are being blackmailed. Basically it's like, hey, if you don't do this thing, whatever the thing is. Now the thing might be, I want more pictures of you. I want money. I want you to do, this thing for me that could be illegal or, you know, would be like a really like a risky thing that they're asking them to do. If you don't do that, I'm going to share this picture that I have of you with your all your contacts. I'm going to put it on a website. Um, so basically, it's like they can do whatever. They're basically, or they're blackmailing a child who, again, imagine this poor child who feels like helpless. Like, what do I do? I'm stuck now. I have to keep doing what this person asked, or they're going to send this picture and it could ruin my life. So that's what they feel like they're up against. And so they're likely to give in to the demands. So that's what sextortion is. Where they're seeing it more and more. So it is becoming a bigger problem as kids are sharing content and it's getting out there in the wrong hands. And then the next thing you know, they're stuck in a really bad situation. A lot of the solicitations that kids are getting come from the social networking sites. A lot of times it's older teens. A lot of times teens are solicited by peers, but sometimes it's adults. Sometimes it's it's adults who are pretending to be their age. And a lot of times kids, this just becomes common and normal for them. So they're not bothered by it. So that's the other thing. It's like they just get used to it. And then it's like, okay, so people are just asking me to send them pictures or asking me for this or that when they're online or on these sites. And they've just gotten used to it. And it's something like, I can't remember. I think it's close to 50 or 60% of mostly girls, if I remember correctly, have had some sort of solicitation when they're on a social media site. So it is very common that this happens. Okay, so just so you know, how are they doing it? They're exploiting their natural curiosity. They're gradually introducing them to things. So they're kind of just getting them used to these ideas. Using adult status to control them, using gifts. I kind of already talked about that. So that's basically the strategies that they use. Again, it leads up to potentially meeting face to face. So if you can imagine the situation where it's like you're out, their parents aren't home, and then they invite this stranger to come over. That would happen over and over in those To Catch a Predator things. The person would come to the house. Obviously, it was not a real person. It was like somebody that they had put in there to pretend like they were a child, but that stuff's really happening. Okay, so really talking about all this stuff with your kids is going to really help them understand what to do, what you want them to do, and then get the police involved if you need to, and then again, report to the cyber tip line. So something to think about too is these slides are from this NetSmarts, which is a really good site if you want to check that out. Kids are reporting stuff. So if they know the right place to report it, to the cybertipline.org, they can actually go there and do that report and feel comfortable doing that. So that's a really good thing. But see, like what they said, buy your gross. Okay, so that's how they got it out. They got out of the situation. Sorry. Okay, so let's talk about what you do to monitor what they're doing. So some of the things that you can do are using tracking apps. So there's various apps that allow you to know where they are, what they're doing. There are things like using screenshot apps. So you can set up some of these things to where they'll take a screenshot of whatever your kids are doing on their phone at various increments of time, so that you can see like, okay, you were doing this and this like every 15 minutes is like, okay, what were they doing on their phone? You can actually get a screenshot of that so that you can actually see what they're doing. And then if you see anything concerning, you can scroll through those screenshots and then be like, okay, well, they were texting with their friend and now they were doing this, and then, oh, now they were looking for something that I don't feel comfortable with, or they saw this image that they shouldn't have seen. So then that allows you to talk to them. But I do recommend letting them know that you are tracking them, so that it's not a breach of trust, so that they aren't like, wait, how did you know that? Oh, you're tracking me. There's a fine line and balance here with letting them know that you trust them, but also making sure that you want letting them know that you want to keep them safe and that that's why you're doing these things. That's why you're doing the monitoring, just like you do in the real world when you ask them questions about where they are, who they're going to be with. I want to talk to your friend's parents before you go there. All those things. It's like these are they're kind of, it's the same strategies. I mean, that like they would be using, but it's online to track what they're doing. And it's all about keeping them safe and out of trouble. And again, it's because their brain is not all the way formed so that they're not able to think through all the consequences is why this is really necessary. So setting limits on their time, I kind of talked about that earlier. Like if, I'm sure your kids, if given the chance, would just sit on their phone or sit on their video games or whatever it is they like to do for hours and hours and hours, and they wouldn't stop if you didn't put limits on them. So that's why we need to do that. And then geofencing is kind of another interesting thing you can do where you put, you can basically kind of put like, think of it as sort of like an electric fence, not that shocks your kids, but just so that you get an alert if they go outside of a certain, let's say your neighborhood or like if, or their school area. So you would know, for example, if they went out of a certain radius, you would get an alert and it's like, oh, they're not where they said they were going to be. So that's kind of what the geofencing allows you to do. Okay, so I want to ask you guys this question. How do you balance their privacy with your desire to keep them safe? So I was just kind of talking about that, but what are your thoughts on if it's okay to take their phone away? Has anybody tried that and how has that gone? And then the other question is it okay to ask for their passwords? How do you guys feel about that when you're talking to your kids about online safety? So we're getting no's. Is that no's to this one? Is it okay to, let's do the first, let's talk, the first one is it okay to take their phones away? What do you guys think about that one?
I just did a break so you can see. But Yasmin did say yes to both. It's part of the agreement. Lots of yeses, all yeses.
Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. So you guys are the parents, right? So you are in charge of the account. And so in a way, just like you're responsible for your kids and their actions in the real world, you're also responsible for what they do in the virtual world as their parents. So you absolutely want to feel like you have control over what they're doing. And that means that you can take their phone away. How many of you have tried taking their phone away? And how did that work? What happened when you did that? Has anybody tried?
I don't have I've never taken a child's phone away, but when my parents took my phone away when I was a teenager, that was fine. I could just find other ways around it, right? You can't take away your school computer, so I can message anyone I want to online that way. But we do have some responses. So
yeah, I'm seeing that tablets. Yeah, so,
yeah, it's hard to take my own phone away from my son. Tablets are an issue for me right now. So
yeah. So so one of the things we have to think about is, okay, so how many of us, and I am totally this way, right? We depend on our phones for everything now, pretty much. We don't just talk on them. It's like we check our emails. I know I do have to do work on them sometimes. A lot of times, like if you're going to a concert, like your tickets are on your phone. Everything is kind of handled through an app nowadays if you're traveling. So many things are on the phone. So I know for me, like if I don't have it, I'm like, where's my phone? We kind of freak out. We're like, where is it? I can't be without my phone next to me. So kids obviously they don't use their phones for a lot of those types of things, but they can definitely have kind of like an addiction to their phones and or their tablets or their whatever it is. So it's really not the device that they're having an addiction to, it's the connection that's being taken away. So if you think about what the device does for them, it keeps them connected to their peers and to like other people out there, right? And so if we cut that off, now all of a sudden they feel isolated. They feel like, oh, I don't know what's happening. I'm going to miss stuff. They're having FOMO. So fear of missing out. So there's a lot to it that's wrapped up into that device. It's not like it's the device itself. It's their access that you're taking away when you take away their phone. So that is the tricky part. And because they have that drive that to seek that, they're likely to find other ways around it. So Kirsten was just talking about, well, she found her laptop and she was using that. So, you take their phone or device away and they go to their friend's house and they're using their device, or they just come up with other ways to find that connection. So when we think about the reasons why they're doing it, it helps us have a little more empathy for them. So if they're using it for staying connected to their peers, at least if you understand, like, well, when you don't have it, you feel disconnected, you feel alone, you feel isolated. At least you can have some empathy for that. Okay, I saw Deborah just put a comment in the chat there. Sorry, let's see. Can you?
Yep, she said, I tried taking my son's phone away. He guilted me into giving it back to him because he said he needed it in an emergency.
Okay. And that's another one. We do hear that a lot. Like the schools this year, like at least Granite School District, this is the first year where they're like, there's no cell phone. They have a no cell phone policy. They're not allowed to have them during the school day. And a lot of parents were up in arms over it. They were like, well, how am I supposed to get in touch with my kids if it's an emergency? So kids feel the same way. It is kind of a safety thing too. Like, and even when I'm driving, I'm like, oh, well, I want to make sure my phone is with me and charged so that if I am in an emergency, I have a lifeline. It's amazing when we think about like all the years we didn't have cell phones or car phones, and we drove and somehow we still, managed. It's very interesting how dependent we've become on this. And of course, our kids have had this from day one, from birth, right? They've known about phones and they've been around. So it's just a very different type of like a different type of relationship, I think, with the technology and with the way of interacting with it and with others. And the other thing that's really interesting, and when I've talked to parents, and they've talked about, it's almost like when you think about the addiction part of it, it's like they're looking for. One mom talked about she had to keep the phone charger under her pillow at night because her son would be like, go around looking for it to charge the phone. She tried to, take it away so he couldn't do it, but he was like literally like going around the house looking for it. I've heard other stories about kids, like going around looking for things like in the middle of the night, right? They're just like, so that is sort of like an addiction, right? It's like they're seeking that, like a drug seeking behavior. So that is a little scary. And obviously, if we get to that point, we see those types of behaviors in our kids, then we have to probably take some action there, and maybe try to get them some help around that. And then as far as
question
yeah,
in the chat, Heather says, I'm not there yet. I have young kids, but when they are old enough, I plan to have a shared phone among all siblings so it doesn't belong to any of them. And we will also sit down and agree to me knowing all passwords, and I can take it away as needed. They will need to agree to it in order to have the privilege of a phone and its access. Is there a way to validate and help that need for connection without, wow, Heather, big word there, acquiescing to a cell phone as an avenue, Lisa?
So I would say there's definitely okay, so yes. So thinking about the need for connection, how can we facilitate real world connection? Can we get them involved in activities so that they are not, if they're involved and engaged in other activities with other people, they're not going to be as focused on their phones. So it's really a lot of the time when they have nothing else to do that they're looking for that, that thing to do. It's sort of like a compulsion. So I would say, partly it's about getting them involved in other things in other ways, trying to get them, maybe letting them actually talk to friends on the phone instead. Hey, you want to feel connected? Let's call your friend. Or, so it's like instead of being on social media or engaging that way with texting, it's like actually like have a conversation. So really focusing with your kids on like ways to build meaningful relationships and friendships, I would say would be a really valuable thing that you can do to help them understand like this is one avenue, but this isn't the main way that we want to actually build our relationships and connections with people. So I hope that helps a little bit. Obviously we could have so much conversation about this. But I would say that would be my main thing, is what can you do to get them engaged in other things and give them other ways to connect. Some, just for you guys to know, there's tons of acronyms and things that kids are using when they're chatting. This is like a few of them, but you can go to websites and kind of look at some of these. So if you look at your child's social media or text messages and you see things that you're like, I don't know what that is, well, it probably means something. So go in, do some searching if you're curious. And then I know we're wrapping up here. So how do you know what's right for your child? So the big thing that I say is observe their behavior, assess their maturity, involve them in creating the limits, rules, and consequences for breaking them. Make sure you know what you are tracking. Be transparent to maintain their trust. So I would say, like, if you are tracking their location, for example, make sure they know that. So it's like that way. It's like if you say, well, where are you right now? And they say, well, I'm at my friend's house. And you say, no, you're not. And they're like, well, how do you know? So you catch them in a lie, but now you've just, you've sort of, the trust, it's going to hurt your trust with them because they didn't know you were doing that. I mean, of course, you're mad that they're lying, but they're mad that mom's or dad's tracking me and I didn't know they were doing that. So try to be transparent just to maintain that trust and that connection with them. And then make sure they understand the connection between responsibility and privacy. And this is about how much responsibility they demonstrate with their devices and letting them know that when you trust them more, they can have more privacy and autonomy with their devices and how they're using them. So I would say that's another thing, is make sure that they're showing you, and it's not just a privilege that an unlimited privilege. It's something that they earn, just like freedom, to stay out later, or freedom to, other things in the real world. You can kind of, treat this the same way, so that they have to demonstrate they can show you that they can handle it before you give them more. And then think about following through on your consequences. Again, remind them that this is about their safety and best interest, so that they don't feel like you're just being mean and trying to keep them from talking to their friends. Okay. And then finally, this is the cyber tip line. So cybertipline.org, or this is a phone number that can be called to 1-800-THE-LOST. And it shows there the things that you can report. So, okay, I know we're at time, so I will stop talking. I'm willing to stand if anybody has any other questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Lisa. Does anyone have any last minute questions? We want to be mindful of your time, but this was such important and great information that I think we can all use, no matter the ages of our children, and even for ourselves. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
You guys are so welcome. Thank you guys for joining today.
All right, I'm not seeing any questions come in. So once again, thank you for your time and for letting us use your brain and your knowledge. We appreciate it.
Absolutely, guys. Take care, and until next time.
Yes.
See you later.
Everyone have a good one. Thanks.